Hey guys, thanks for joining us at the round table. This is a part 2 of our Sacred Cows of Parenting. If you missed last week, we encourage you to go take a look at or listen to that. That was on faith and discipline. And this week we talk about school, grades, extracurriculars, and media. And so it was a really fun conversation. We talked a little bit about just our own Sacred Cows in these as well. But we hope it's encouraging to you, and so we hope you enjoy. I think some of our best conversations actually happen not necessarily in front of a microphone.
Yeah, totally.
And we get a little...
Our best content.
Our best content is on our text chain.
I was really looking forward to talking to Lorri about that at Lowe's the other day, but she totally snubbed me.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Were you in the gardening section?
We were in the gardening section.
So I get this, I get this text, and I'm on the text chain, and Jeff's like, Lorri, are you at Lowe's right now? And you had a conversation by yourself because no one answered. I was driving.
Oh, yeah, no.
Lorri was still ignoring you. And so what'd you say?
Well, what was funny, I was with Carol Ann, so it's kind of like, okay, well, obviously you're not going to talk to me, but Carol Ann's standing right here. Everybody stops to talk to Carol Ann. She's either in the zone or what? They had a conversation that I don't know about, and there's like friction.
Oh, no.
My mind went so many places.
Did it really? Can you imagine Carol and I having friction?
Well, one,
I
can't imagine you snubbing anybody because that would take way too much energy. You would not invest that much
but
emotion into it.
Can't you imagine me not noticing people?
No.
Like, that's sort of what just happened.
Yeah, no,
I was tunnel vision in my plants.
Yeah. I was like,
there she goes.
Wow. I can't believe I did that.
And the word was snubbed.
It was snubbed.
It was. I'm sorry I snubbed you.
It's okay.
But you did correctly use and spell doppelganger in a text. So that was impressive because you said, did you just snub me or did I get snubbed by your doppelganger?
Well,
thank you,
autocorrect.
Oh, okay.
Autocomplete. If you type in DOPP,
it's going.
Just finishes it. Yeah,
wow.
Pretty much.
It was impressive. I was impressed. So I'm sorry.
Over the A.
Yeah, I know it had. Anyway.
Just like everybody else in the world, we also have a little bit more courage to call each other out.
For better or worse.
Over text, yeah. It's the power of the keyboard. Actually, I know you too. You would call me out in person too.
So you push back, which would be even more fun.
Yeah. Which is, it's fun though, because I almost got into it yesterday. So yesterday I said, hey guys, we're just going to do a little recap and I think the question was something like,
is there anything we need to clear up? I think is what you asked.
Yeah.
Hold on, I'll find it. Hold on.
And so, Jeff, then you said something like, which one, something that you want to correct that I said.
Okay, so here.
And I was like, how did you know? That's what I wanted to do.
Because that was passive aggressive.
Well, we talked about.
We talk about a lot of things.
Yeah.
You're still scrolling.
Perhaps don't read all those things, Jeff.
Scrolling.
I don't.
Oh, my heavens. Let's see. Added a question, kick us off. Is there anything you think of one of us should clarify? Maybe something we talked about last time, i.e., what did I say that concerned you? Was me asking a question. And then I said, obviously, whatever Lorri said sounded gracious. You said, maybe the guilt, shame versus conviction or discipline. I went, And Lorri said, what needs to be clarified? I agree. Kids just sometimes feel shame. And it just kind of went down from there.
It did go downhill from there.
Oh, goodness.
Mostly because I could see you in my mind's eye, like squiggling, like, oh, the shame thing again. That's what I wanted to clarify. And Lori's going to double down.
Double down. That's right. So I didn't sleep at all last night. No. It's interesting. So last episode, so this is part 2 of 2 parts. So if you're listening to this, I would recommend you go back to listen to part 1 of Sacred Cows of Parenting. But we talked about first, I think faith was the big one, a big bucket that we talked about. And then we talked about discipline and then we just ran out of time. So that's why we're back the second time around. And so with faith, we just talked about making disciple makers. We talked about our job of, with the Deuteronomy 6 passage of teaching them, modeling. Anything else that jumps out? I don't know if when we talked about faith, Lorri.
No, just the concept of that the sacred cow is we should just let kids discover their own faith.
Yeah.
We shouldn't push it on them. So that's kind of where that discussion came from. So if you're listening to this and that's an interesting concept, you go back and listen.
Yeah, we use the word intentionality a lot,
right.
I think. Was a word as well.
And I think, a lot of, depending on what, tradition you've grown up in from a church standpoint, parents of grown children, you talk about shame, walk around feeling all the shame because they've been taught the Bible wrong. They've been taught things that are principles as promises. We always go back to the one in Proverbs about, if you train up a child in the way they should go, when they're old, they'll not depart from it.
Right.
Well, my child's off in the weeds, so I must be a horrible person. Well, you may be a horrible person, but that may not be why your kid's off in the weeds. You know what I mean? So I think we've, unfortunately, the church has put a lot of shame on parents for things that, at the end of the day, your kid is an autonomous individual with a heart and a mind and a will of their own. And all we can do is all we can do. And then we have to trust them to the Lord.
Yeah.
And I think if we have trained them up intentionally, then if that ends up being the case, we as parents can't really experience regret. We just have to say, you're in God's hands. Like I did intentionally what the Bible told me to do. Yeah. And now there's just a faith element to it. Right. If we don't parent them intentionally and there's kids who are off wayward doing stuff that we would choose for them not to do, then I do think we as the parents can experience this little negative emotion of regret. Like, what if I had done this differently? What if? And so I think that principle is just train them up in the way they should go and let God do his thing.
Yeah. I heard what you guys were saying. I heard trust, like a trust in the Lord. But then I also heard grace, because like you will mess up. Yep. We talked about that too last time. Like, you won't get everything right, but it isn't a time for, regret as much as, like, grace abounds.
That's right.
And we can trust in that. And it's never too late either. Right. I don't think.
I agree.
To pour in spiritually into your children.
That's a good point.
So, and then we talked about discipline, and that's kind of,
let's go to where Joey messed up.
You're getting brave over there behind that little microphone of yours.
I'll go back and find that text there.
It did end with me sending the little gif of saying, bring it. So Joey was ready for the fight.
That's true. That is true. No, last time, I think it was, as I think about discipline, one of the things that I've read a lot about, there's this book I referenced, Parenting is Heart Work. And I just know what's natural to me is to react, is to be a reactionary parent. Why did you do that? And when you say things like that, or better, I don't see that as very productive. It makes me feel, I guess, better, because there's an immediate satisfaction of like, I'm the parent, I've taught you this, you're the kid, you're small, and you did something wrong. And so I always need to check myself in discipline to make sure I want to woo them to something and not push them away and down. So I think it's a little bit of semantics when we use the word, like, for example, the statement was made, sometimes kids need to feel shame. I think I
probably said that.
I buck against that a little bit is, the way in which the Lord disciplines is a forward moving, sanctification very much is a forward moving, becoming more like Christ, and there's a wooing to it. There's a recognition of wrongdoing. You've seen me around my kids, that there's a standard, and that we teach them the ways of the Lord, and there is discipline. But the discipline is to get them not to be stuck somewhere. And when I think of the word shame and guilt, those words, they're synonymous to me as stuck and not redemptive, to move forward. And so I always go toward, when parenting, and I think I make that clarification because I do believe that there are some parents, because I know I'm one of them, that could get stuck I don't want them to feel like it's okay to continually heap shame as if you're any better than your child in a spiritual sense, but you want to actually woo your children.
I think that's 100% true. I think you're talking about it in the big picture, and sort of what I was thinking of was the little picture, the day-to-day, in my house, my kid knew, like, here's what you're going to get punished for. Willful disobedience, period.
Yeah.
That's the only thing in my household where there was going to be actual punishment that might make a child feel somewhat ashamed. Right. And so if there wasn't willful disobedience, then what I was going to do was say, hey, that was maybe a weird choice you made just then. Like, I am going to come to that with all sorts of grace and redirection. But if there is willful disobedience in my kid's life where I have said, hey, don't touch that, and they look right at me and touch that, there's going to be a moment where I want them to feel something akin to regret, perhaps not shame. I don't know. That's
that's where
semantics.
I think
Yeah, for sure. But I do want there to be an immediate consequence of wow, this is when mom gets off the rails, is when, not when I've done something dumb and kid-like, not when I've made a choice that is not wise, but when I have willfully disobeyed, it's going to happen hard and fast in my house.
I think when you paint that picture, to me, there is this there is a need for all of us humans to experience repentance.
Right.
We need to, and we only really are repentant when we understand we've done something wrong.
Exactly.
Right.
In the little picture and the big picture, we're talking about humanity.
Right. And so I think that's where, again, the goal is not to stay there,
right,
but to move forward.
Yeah. So to put the responsibility on the parent, which I think is what you're doing here. I would never want to impose shame on my kids,
right,
then, now, or later.
Right.
But if they feel shame over something they've done, that can be restorative. That can be sanctifying.
Okay,
like that may be the thing that they need to bear up under and come out from only by God's grace, so that they don't repeat that same mistake.
Look at us peeling back layers and
having
clarity.
We did.
Psalm 32, baby.
Okay.
That's right. Psalm 32. Blessed the one whose transgression is forgiven, whose sin is covered. Blessed is the man against whom the Lord counts no iniquity, and in whose spirit there is no deceit. For when I kept silent, my bones wasted away through my groaning all day long. For day and night your hand was heavy upon me. My strength was dried up as by the heat of summer. David's basically saying, he's basically saying, I felt the weight. I felt the shame of what I've done. God never went in and tried to remove that shame from him. God allowed it to rest on him until David finally cried out for help, right? And so I think as parents, we do our kids a disservice. I think that's kind of where the discussion was at least trying to go last time, when we try to prevent them from feeling their consequences.
Yeah,
because, we don't want them to, have this image of themselves. No, I want my kids to know they're dirty, rotten, stinking sinners just like their dad. And they need to understand that that's who they are apart from the work of the Lord in their life, know. And sometimes it's, for me, sometimes it's shame. Yeah. Fear of shame or feeling shame from something.
And
like
I think the grace part is you sit with your child to say, doesn't that stink?
Yeah. Right.
Because God didn't go anywhere in Psalm 32. Like he was there waiting
That's right.
patiently, lovingly, long-sufferingly.
So for our parents listening to this, be that guy.
Right.
Be the one who is sitting and is listening and who is commiserating with how bad sin is, and how bad willful disobedience is, and then show them a better way.
That's right. And then drawing the parallel to, I'm just like that too. And the blood of Jesus saved me. And God doesn't see me that way. God sees me through the blood of Jesus, pure. And that's how I see you, kid. I love you. I understand your mistake. Like, we have to model. I find it so amazing that God calls himself Father and then gives us children. We learn so much about who we are and who God is by our parenting. And if we'll constantly think about, what I'm doing right now at this moment must look like what my 3-year-old is. You know what I mean? God must be looking at me going, poor pumpkin. You don't know any better. Yeah. I feel like that's a really good analogy. He calls himself Father for a reason. Yeah. He's the ultimate parent.
I love it. I feel better.
Good.
Okay, good. Glad we clarified.
Awesome. So today we have a couple more buckets to talk about after faith and discipline. I feel like another sacred cow, or there's just tons of sacred cows under these buckets, and maybe you guys can help me put words to them.
A whole field of cows.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
like driving through East Texas when we're talking about this stuff.
That's also another good title for a field of cows today. Under schooling. And grades and extracurriculars. That's the first one we'll talk about here in just a second. And then obviously there's the last one we'll talk about is media and all the different types of things that cows that have been created with media. But I think with schooling in particular, the first thing that I thought of in general was the following is that we just believe our way is the best and correct way, and we impose that on everybody else. Right. Now, that is the essence of a sacred cow, but specifically when it comes to parenting styles.
Right.
Like I was talking to Stephanie in prepping for this, and she goes, you just got to be careful because we have a parenting style, but other people's parenting styles are different, and we don't want to impose new sacred cows on people, and so we're going to try to be cautious of that. But one of the things I hear a lot with schooling is, come on, it's got to be public school because we're called to have our children be salt and light, and they need to be in the real world, and they got to learn how to be in the real world. Now, as a homeschool parent, I actually naturally bend that way.
Right.
So to actually homeschool my children is like a weird phenomena that there's unity in our household in it, but it was weird. It was hard for me. The homeschoolers, we're in that world, or Christian school people. I cannot indoctrinate my kids with secular values. We need to train them up. We need to get them here, and so that when they go out in the real world, they have foundation in their values. Right. That's a couple that I hear.
Yeah.
Have you heard other things around schooling? Other sacred cows, or is that pretty much kind of the
That's the main bucket.
deal? Yeah, right.
I have a good friend who calls it the tender shoot theory. So when they're little and they're just, think about a blade of grass or whatever, they're just sort of coming up tiny. Do you protect them then so that they can have the chance to grow up and be big and healthy? Or do you do it the other way around where, you give them some tensile strength? Like if you stake a tree, that doesn't need to be staked. It's only gonna it can't grow and be strong. When you take those stakes off, even when it gets big, its root system
the roots will never
is
develop,
not there. So both analogies work. And so can we just say wisdom,
there you go.
wisdom? You just pray for wisdom for your particular kid and your particular situation.
You do, yeah.
You do me, and we'll be fine. But I think, each family is its own little organism,
Yes.
Absolutely.
It's its own little country. We were talking about a podcast earlier, and this pastor moved here from South Africa, right? And he's talking about, being among other Christians, how he's experiencing Christianity differently. But it's not necessarily wrong. It's just he hadn't seen it that way before because he's from another culture. And I think we almost, when we walk into someone else's home, hear somebody else's parenting style, choices they've made for their kids, a lot of times we might take that mentality a little bit and just say, you know what, that's not my family. What can I learn?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That sort of thing, and not judge it as right or wrong.
Yeah.
But just view it as different. Now, within the different, there are some things that are probably right, probably wrong, because we're all imperfect parents, imperfect people.
Right.
It's kind of the why behind it. If it's done out of fear, well, it can go either way. I'm going to make sure I send my kids to public school because I feel so inadequate to be able to educate my children. I just don't know that God could even use me that way, kind of thing. Well, that's fear, so don't base it on that. I'm going to keep my kids at home and homeschool them because I'm so afraid of what the public school system might do to them. Well, that's a wrong motive. I don't care what comes after that, but the fear is wrong. You know what I mean?
No, that's really
Make
good.
sense?
Yeah. I had similar. This sentiment was that we have said in our house, every child is different.
Yep.
Like the family unit is its own organism, but then every child is his own. And
I've seen some families that send some to public and
That's right.
homeschool.
That's
some.
right.
I think that's wise.
you don't have to draw this line in the sand and totally adopt the whole keeping your hands, the metaphor of just open hands and with every child and saying, Lord, give us wisdom. So literally every February, March, we're actually going through this right now. We agonize because we have to make the decision on the next year.
Right.
And sometimes it is literally the 11th hour where we are finally making the decision that the homeschool co-op needs to know or the public school needs to, whatever the case is.
Is it because you're afraid?
No, we literally want
Okay,
to
good. I
know
didn't want
from
to
the
have
Lord.
that conversation on air.
On air, right? No, it really is just for our daughter or for each of our sons, and I mean it even starts with even preschool. When is it right for each child and. And we just do, and it's my sentiment I said last time. We just do the best we can with the information we have, but we don't hold it so tightly to where everything else is unreasonable. Yeah. It's just an open-handed posture.
Yeah, my wife works within not special education, but she works with kids with some learning disabilities and things like that. And one of the biggest problems she encounters is kids not getting services or tested or evaluated for certain things that could actually help them because of the parents' fear of how that's going to impact their reputation as a parent or their kids' fear or their kids' reputation as a student as they go forward in school. And so I think that's kind of the non-faith analogy of that.
Right.
It's like you're literally robbing your kid of being successful because of your concern for reputation, that sort of thing.
Whatever you choose, how it looks on you.
Put that back on Christian parents.
Yeah.
And I think we do the same a lot of times. We keep our kids from, and they're okay, reel it back.
Yep.
There is there's wisdom to be applied in all this. So we're talking kind of generally here. You have to decide. There are certain things that are going to be case by case. We're saying all that. Okay. So, but man, it's that fear thing. It's like, I don't want my kid to play this sport, or I do want my kid to play this sport, or I want my kid to go to public school. I don't want my kid to go to public school. Based on your reputation, or based on your energy level, or based on what you're willing to do as a parent, like I don't want to have that hard conversation, so let's just keep them home.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. I don't know. It's just such a disservice. It shows a lack of faith.
Yeah.
I think maybe a lack of, I don't want to go so far as say a lack of love, but selfishness as a parent. If I'm more concerned about how it's going to impact me as a parent and less about what it's doing to my kid, I think that's wrong.
I think when it comes to school, we have to remember that we as their parent will always be their main teacher, period.
That's good.
Should
And
be
so,
their main teacher.
no, we will be.
You think?
Yeah,
Either
because
way?
they'll watch and
They are going to watch and
model
learn.
something.
You are their main teacher. So
even if you abdicate that role.
that's right.
Yeah. Okay. That's
if
good.
you're making that decision out of fear, your kid knows it. Whether they know it and could articulate it or not.
They'll figure it out at some point.
They will figure it out at some point. And so I think it's important to remember, if we're thinking about it from an educational schooling sort of bucket, you're their main teacher, whether you choose to see it that way or not. So if you're homeschooling them, you are technically their main teacher and their main model, but I'm still my kid's main teacher. And I've got to, maybe I have to work harder with my public school kid to communicate with her so that I know what's going on at school.
Yeah, that's good.
Because then I want to also be the teacher of what she has learned that day. So yes,
Help
I send,
interpret, help apply that,
right. So yes, I send my kid to public school, and 100% I have a bias because I taught 15 years in public school.
Sure.
And I remember when Reese was a baby thinking, I can't, if I think about the 3 kids in each of my high school classes who were faithful believers, who were salt and light, and I take those 3 kids out of every class, it would have been dark. And for me, because of my experience,
Right.
I was going to send my kid to public school with the caveat of, but if it ends up not being right,
Yeah.
then there'll be other options. But my point in that is, because I chose public school for my kid, I also intentionally chose to over communicate. So like this is probably a sacred cow for me. Shoot, I just realized it while we were sitting here.
You ran right into that.
I was
sacred cow.
running right into it, and all of a sudden I went, "Oh my gosh, this is a sacred cow." Are y'all dying for what it is now?
Your facial reaction was priceless. You were just like, "Uh-oh."
This is a sacred cow. Crud.
Can you hear the mooing in the background?
That's right.
I know.
All right, let's have it.
Okay, so here's my sacred cow. Dang it. I don't.
This better be good.
It's not good. It's not that big of a deal. It's not good. It's just that I realized it. So now I'm like, I don't let Reese, I didn't and still don't let Reese ride the bus or carpool because I want the 10 minutes before and the 10 minutes after.
Okay. Yeah.
And dang it, I've always been like, and that's the key to success. Shoot.
There you go. But it
for
could be
wisdom,
wise for you all.
exactly. For
Yeah.
wisdom's sake, I want that time.
Yeah.
I want the time when she opens the door for me to say that day, think about other people before yourself today. Or if I know she's in a bad place, to be able to say, hey, no one in here loves you like Jesus, so
Yeah.
shut your ears.
And I think the biblical principle in that, while the action of the 10 minutes before, 10 minutes after could be a sacred cow if you hold that standard to everybody else.
I kind of
The
did.
principle
I
is-
judge the bus people. Shoot. I'm just kidding. I don't
I
really.
like those bus people.
That's right. You know what I mean? Like,
But-
that's how I realized just now it was a sacred cow, because I was
Yeah.
like, yeah, that's the way you should
That's
do
the
it.
way you do it. Yeah. But the principle is you want to have a relationship with your children.
Yeah.
You want to communicate with your children.
Yeah.
Intentional.
You're
Carve out
intentional.
time, yeah.
That was a time for you to do that, which is really, really good. I think the bucket here, or the response to the schooling thing, is like, I love the stop parenting out of fear. And I think if we had intentional last time, I think the word invitation, or invite the Lord into these decisions. We get a metaphorical whiteboard out with the mom and dad, and you start drawing, and you start figuring out, or you start kind of going back and forth, and then you invite the kid into it, and it's like, oh yeah, wait, we haven't even prayed about this yet,
right?
And so I would just encourage you guys to invite God into it, and that really kind of goes into even under the bucket of schooling is also like grades and extracurriculars and driving toward college, right? I mean, I guess I've heard this a lot, particularly from our student guys, the pressure on these two school districts that our church kind of is around is immense. And I, as a parent of young children, I'm starting to feel it. Really? I started to feel, this need, okay, like we can't afford to send everybody to school. So y'all better figure this out, and you all better get good grades, and and so there's this pressure that kind of builds up. But I don't know if we want to identify some sacred cows for grades. I don't know about grades, but for extracurriculars in particular, if I don't do this, or my kid's success is a report card on how I'm doing as a parent now and how I'm doing later. Anyway, I don't know any extracurricular type stuff that you guys thought about.
I love the way Brad always talks about it. It's tongue in cheek and very serious all at the same time as he's good at doing. But he talks about the parents that have their kids in 4 different select sports so that they can one day play in college. It's like your kid's not that good. I don't care how many select teams are on, they're not that good.
P.S. Select sports are really expensive, and if you would just save that money, perhaps you could send them to college.
Right. Yeah,
I mean,
seriously.
I have a kid who I spend ridiculous amounts of money on to play volleyball, and thank the Lord she loves it, and she's driving the bus, and I'm back there like, when do we get to get off this bus?
Right.
But, keeps her out of trouble and those kind of things. But truly, man, that select sports stuff is expensive.
Yeah.
Expensive, it's time consuming.
Yeah.
But it also is character building.
Can be, for sure.
It is for my kid because you have to learn to lose well and anyway and
I'm
win
sure you
well.
guys talk
and
all about that in the 10
we
minutes
do.
on the way to school and 10 minutes.
We do, and the hour on the way to practice and the hour on the way home from practice.
Yeah.
But I think that it's important to do sports, but get them in the right.
Yeah, whether it's sports,
Get 'em in.
my daughter does theater.
Right.
I mean,
That's a lot of time, too.
There are things that are good to allow your kids to explore and do, but they themselves cannot become gods.
That's right.
In your life, because you made a point earlier that we are our kids' main teacher. That if we just tell them, and that's why we, you might think, geez, pastors, y'all are so hung up on Sunday
Real
morning
towers over
at
there.
9 and 11, and so what that we don't come at 9 or 11, but you're setting a tone that these things are more important than. So we have some practices set up for Sunday mornings this season right now for both of my boys, and they won't go.
Right.
And it's not like I'm trying to be this holy roller. There's that phrase, or what was the phrase that you didn't know?
Nowadays, I think they say.
Nowadays. What do they say?
I think he said Bible thumper.
Bible
Remember, and he was like, "Am I supposed to hit you with it?"
Yeah. So, but I'm not trying. I'm not. But I am going to set a tone and say, hey, no, guys, we're gonna go to church on Sundays, and so.
Yeah. That gets back to Lori's point that you are your child's primary teacher.
You are.
Because you're teaching them by example. Yeah, that's really good.
Well, and I think too, can we just say as a big over before we move, this whole conversation it's a blessing that we even get to have this conversation.
Sure. Yeah.
So many people in not just the world, but Texas and Austin do not get to have this conversation about should we homeschool our kids or should we send them to public school or private school?
These are first world problems.
These are like high order first world problems.
Yeah.
And so while they absolutely do need to be treated with wisdom, and I'm not trying to dismiss it, it is a big deal. And because we have the opportunity to make the choice, we should do it wisely.
Yeah, no, that's good.
But also, it's a blessing that we get to grapple.
Yeah. And I think, I was just thinking about this as you were saying that, like, we live in this part of the world and country where performance is such a big deal, and like how our appearance before others with grades and extracurriculars, we don't want to create this performance-based mentality that they have to achieve for achievement's sake.
Yep.
But we want to instill good work ethic.
Work ethic.
We want to instill, that hard work is rewarding, but not necessarily that end result that the performance of it is what is most important, because then they're going to have constant performance anxiety about everything they do in life, and it's just not.
And
helpful.
think about what is so hard in the American church for us to understand grace? Well, because we think we have to perform.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And that
Right.
God doesn't love us if we aren't doing everything. I mean, oh gosh, Reese, don't listen to this. I'm going to out her right here. She had a really bad week last week and got in the car after a particularly bad incident at practice. She's really hard on herself and said something like, I think this is happening to me because I didn't do my Bible study this week.
Karma alert. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought I had to keep myself calm because I wanted to just scream like you were
wanted to
saying,
feel shame for
you
that
know
statement."
better than this.
Yeah.
But you know what? She didn't know better than that because this is the first time we had ever been at this spot where my 13-year-old was like, I have been choosing not to have my quiet time in the morning.
Yeah.
And look what's happening.
Yeah.
And the mom in me has to go like, okay, wait, how do I use this moment? Part of me wants to use the moment to go, you're darn right, stay in the Bible, kid. Like, right? And then the other part
Whatever
of me
takes
is,
to motivate,
exactly, whatever it takes. And but the other part of me, just with tears in my eyes, said, oh my gosh, I have failed you in this moment. That is not how God works.
Yeah.
And so we had this discussion of, you still would have probably been having this week, but maybe if you had been in the Word, it wouldn't have felt so heavy.
Yeah.
You could be more prepared.
Maybe you could have gone like, yes, I stunk it up this week, but God still loves me because I read this morning
your
that there's no
perspective,
condemnation in
Yeah.
Romans. So that's what I mean. Like,
That's a really great example, I think, for our parents to hear.
it actually happened last week in the car.
And just that it happens in those moments
Yep.
and that you heard it and were listening to it. And I think we talked a little bit the busyness of families last week, but we just keep so busy with these extracurriculars, and on the to and the from, we just blare the music or we just ignore the teachable moments. And I just think we need to be really, I hate to go back to the word we used last week, but intentional in those moments, because that's a real special moment I think she'll remember.
Probably, hopefully.
Just from saying out of exasperation, I'm having a bad week because of she wasn't even thinking about the comment.
Right.
But man, it was such a good
but
opportunity.
theologically, it was
a
like,
big moment.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah, I like the way you played that out, though. You might be having a bad week because you didn't do that, but let's define what the bad week is.
Right.
It's the fact that you don't feel peace. It's the fact that you know, those kind of things. And that comes from an abiding relationship with with
it does. It's because
Jesus,
you're not
right?
listening to the Holy Spirit, because we got to train ourselves to do that.
so good.
You're listening to your own spirit.
Yeah, I think of 1 Corinthians 10:31. So whether you eat, drink, whatever you do, homeschool, extracurricular, select, 10 minutes in the car to and from school or ride the bus, whatever you do all to the glory of God.
Yeah.
You know, that's kind of the wisdom
right.
principle that overlays all the stuff we're talking about. And if you're doing something, again, fear is such a big motivator for parents. And let's be honest, I mean, it's scary to be a parent.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, the worst.
We're not saying that fear is irrational or even wrong. It's what you do with that fear, right? Can you surrender that to the Lord? Can you be? I'm gonna say this, and it's kind of wrong theologically. I'm gonna say it anyway. Can you be fearful as a parent to the glory of God?
Okay, let me hash
Can
that out.
you be?
Can you experience fear to the
yeah.
glory of God?
Yeah.
Hold it in tension.
Yeah,
I think
that's
that's what you're
right.
saying.
Yeah.
It's
That's
like
right.
it is scary, and it's but the goal is to, again, it's kind of like with a parent and a child, but with the Father and us, that we're drawn back to Him. You know, that we are feeling nervous and anxious, fearful.
Can we
and
fear
yet-
the Lord more than we
There you
fear
go.
the outcome of our
That's
kids?
right.
Yeah,
That's
that's
right.
great.
Of our parenting.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said that untheologically sound thing so that we could hash it out and make it all theological.
Sometimes you got to go.
You do actually.
Hey, that's really good conversation. I think let's move to media, the last one, and let's see what we have here. I think some of the things I hear is no kids under the age of 18 should ever have a cell phone, and they certainly should never have a smartphone. Social media is absolute evil. My kids will never have it. Never, ever I'm never going to let my kid watch anything bad on television.
Who are you talking to?
I didn't look at you. I was looking down at my paper.
I think he sees one of our reflections in his phone.
Exactly. I don't know.
So this is the one that we came up with, Sacred Cows, and it was the first argument we got into on this, and we decided to hold it until this very moment.
So here we go.
Here we go.
So I think one of the big things under this media umbrella is that it's inundated. It's everywhere. It's at every turn. There are studies out there actually that the blue light on our phones actually triggers the same thing that drugs do in our brains, and so it becomes very addicting. And so I don't know about you all. I know that I struggle being addicted to my phone, and so I could be having family time, and yet my impulse is to pick up my phone and either answer one of your all's texts, or I'm blaming you on it. Sin.
I'm not denying my complicity in it.
Or going to Twitter and looking up sports things, and here my child is asking me a question for the third time that I didn't hear because I'm on my phone. Right. So there's an obvious realization, and clearly in television shows and movies, there are things that are not helpful whatsoever. Where my thought comes from this is years ago, Stephanie and I were at a retreat, a marriage retreat type situation, and he was talking about balance, and he was talking about the way in which a couple of things he did. This counselor did it with his children, and he said, one of the things I don't show my kids like horrible things, and the line on that is debatable on what's horrible to you and not horrible to somebody else. And he goes, but when there's moments where perhaps there's an intimate moment in a movie, he'll actually pause the movie and he'll have a conversation, and he brings them along. He says, so let's talk through this. And clearly it's been a conversation they've had before, and they talk about sex, and they talk about between a man and a wife and what God's view is on sex. And it's an opportunity to reinforce. So are these people married? No, they're not married. Should they be doing, what are the consequences of their actions and what they're doing? And more often than not in the movie, what you'll see is a consequence from that interaction of intimacy later on. They're both miserable for some reason and whatever. I digress. So, one of the things that we do is we do allow our kids to watch certain things like PG-13 or things that are above where they are right now, and we have a conversation about it. The goal is that we invite them along the journey and converse about things. So anyway, that's kind of my heart. I mean, there's more to that, I'm sure, as we get into it, but that's kind of where I come from.
Yeah, I totally, again, it's that communication thing that we were talking about with public school, private school. Yeah. My kid goes to public school, so I don't have to show her those movies. She just sees it at school.
Right.
Oh, Mom, that's nothing. You'll never believe.
Exactly. That kind of thing. Yeah. But I do think it's the communication piece of it. I'm pretty protective of what, I guess, so this is so 1980. So sorry, Joey. I'll look at Jeff while I talk about this part. Nowadays. I'm a
that was
real...
before Back to the Future came out.
Okay.
I'm real garbage in, garbage out kind of girl.
Okay, yeah, sure.
And I don't... See, Jeff's laughing because that's so 80s.
Yeah, totally.
It's like Josh McDowell or something. I don't know.
This is Lori's second sacred cow.
That's right. It probably is. Yeah. But that is my mentality. That's when we argued about it, I could see your side of it. My side of it is garbage in, garbage out. Like what I consume
that's good.
Comes out in some way. And so I want to limit my kids' consumption of worldly things.
Yeah. Well, you're setting a pattern for them to do that as an adult as well. It's like it isn't that you totally avoid eating meat.
Right.
Just make sure that sort of thing.
Right. And that's probably where I need to be a little better, Joey, is like I probably am a media vegan. I do avoid eating meat. I avoid eating if we're going to make that analogy.
Vegan, I like that. Yeah.
I probably am a little too purist about it.
Yeah, and I just wonder, I want to allow, first of all, there's a I can't remember the word. I'm blanking on the word, but for pastors' kids to be super sheltered,
right?
And
a tendency
to all of a sudden get to high school or college and then be shocked by everything.
Yeah, I mean, it's a PK is a stereotype for a reason.
Right. Yeah, and so we try to make sure our kids. Now, they're still going to be shocked by things because the world is the world, and there will be things that they're like, wait, my parents didn't talk to me about that.
Your parents didn't know about that.
Yeah. And so we try to be the first ones where they're going to hear
absolutely
about some of these things.
Yeah.
And so my thing is just as we make disciples, we're making disciples in the current culture in which we live. And, we want to help them make decisions on their own.
Yeah.
And so we say, hey, this isn't valuable trash in, trash out. Like
Right.
this isn't valuable for you to consume.
Right.
You know,
You're
but
redeeming the trash.
But instead of dictating to them what the trash is and what the trash isn't, I want them to know and
Yeah.
identify what
That's
the trash
nice.
is.
That's
and what
good.
the trash
Yeah,
isn't.
we always kind of did. I mean, we never, there's nothing in what you're saying that I think that you're implying this at all, but we never knowingly put our kids in front of something that we knew was going to
Yeah.
raise all kind of questions.
Yeah.
But if we found ourselves in that situation and they
Right.
were old enough to ask the question or
Right.
make the observation, we would address that at the age appropriate level,
Right.
at least as best as we knew how at that
Right.
time. Because when they're 3 or 4 and something happens on a sitcom that's always been just fine to watch, and all of a sudden they sneak something in,
Yeah.
Right.
episode 7,
Yeah.
and your son goes, "What are they doing?" What do
right.
you think they're doing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, one of the things that as a pastor we get asked a lot is how do we handle it and what do we do? And what I try to tell, because Selah's friends will say, well, what do your parents let you do so I can tell my parents what
Right.
the pastor's family
Right,
is
'cause
allowed
if
to
they're
do.
doing it.
Yeah. And so I always try to tell Selah, listen, we talk about
happens in the
things.
Rider home?
Yeah, stays in the Rider home. Exactly. I try to tell Selah, we allow you and we give you a leash, and as soon as that leash is is taken advantage of, then that will become a shorter leash.
Right.
And so, but your friends might not know that, and so you just
Her
gotta
friends
know.
go home and say, at the Sailor House, they put their kids on at the Red House, they put their
Yeah.
kids on a leash.
That's right.
Like,
Yeah.
that wasn't it.
That was not
That
quite
was
the
not
example,
it.
But yeah, so I just, we try to just, if you're listening to this, I'm not creating a template for you.
Right.
That is for us and our household. And that goes back to our original point with what the Sacred Cow series is. It's not a matter of necessarily right or wrong, but of wisdom. And so for
Right.
you, again, to invite the Lord into how you navigate these types of situations. And I think if a couple, a husband and wife, a mom and a dad, are differ on this, what would you guys say to the advice of at the onset, just erring on the side of conservatism, or
I think usually if a husband and wife are disagreeing on this, it's because they haven't heard each other's hearts. Usually when you say, okay, this is what I would choose on this, and this is why, I think there can be some sort of consensus.
Sure.
Yes. So in our household, Jared came home with an iPhone for our daughter and showed it to her before he told me.
Oof.
I had said, this is when we're doing this. And that is not how it happened.
We love you, Mr.
Jared.
Winkleplatt.
That's right.
Because he felt so strongly about it, and I felt so strongly about it.
Yeah.
And he knew that he wasn't going to talk me.
Okay.
He just wasn't. And because I don't dig in that often,
Yeah.
but I had dug in. And she was at a place, she was in the 7th grade. Only one of her friends who didn't have a phone. It really was sports related.
Yeah,
She was in a carpool with, she was going to Round Rock all the time. Anyway, and she was in a carpool where she would get anxiety because all the other kids had phones, and she was just sitting there at 9:00 at night staring out the window with some kids she didn't really know that well.
Sure. Yeah.
And Jared was like,
protective.
It was.
As the father.
It was as the father. And once he explained that, I was like, well, perhaps you could have explained that before you brought the phone
Right.
home. But he was right.
Yeah,
and I
sure.
hadn't been looking at it through that
That's
lens.
good. Thanks for sharing that. I think that's really good, really helpful.
I think one of the things, if as a parent, if you go to the Bible looking for all the things you should do, you're honestly not going to find much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's not
That's
a
good.
lot written about parenting.
You mean
a lot
there's
about,
not a lot about iPhones in the Bible?
I know, right? But there's a lot about relationships. There's a lot
Yep.
about
Good.
purity, God's will for us, those kind of
That's
things. I
right.
mean, you go to Ephesians 4, 5, and 6, it's talking about the church, and then you get to the very end of it, and there's, 4 little verses about children and parents. But I think everything in 4, 5, and 6 applies to that relationships,
Yep.
but there's just a couple things that are highlighted. So, we walk as wise and not unwise.
Yeah.
I mean, it says, look carefully then how you walk, Ephesians 5, 15, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of the time because the days are evil. Do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is. And that applies to our parenting, right? It applies to our relationship with husband and wife, obviously, but as our parents, we have to redeem the time. And whether that's modeling, whether that's saying no to things that other parents say yes to, and just being okay with that tension that your kid's going to feel, that you're going to feel at the ball game when your kid's the only one that won't do this, that, or the other. or whatever. I mean, because that's the other thing we haven't even talked about. It's like the impact on the parent for some of these decisions. You know, if let's say Reese didn't have that iPhone now, well,
Right.
Y'all the only parent sitting here. Some mom is going to say, "How come you don't let your kid have the iPhone like everybody else?"
Right.
You know, whatever. And then it's like, well, now I'm in the middle of it. What just happened? You know,
Right.
and that kind of that's all real. Like we understand all that stuff,
Yep.
but all we can do as Jesus followers is try to redeem the time and make the best use of it and apply wisdom where we can, and then trust that God is still in control, because we will screw that up.
That's right.
Well, and I think it's really interesting. Are we wrapping up?
Yeah, pretty
like
close, but you go for it. My body language said it all.
There is no bow. Don't bow it yet.
Well, I don't know. I was just going to link off to what you were saying,
it.
but it kind of is like tie it up. Sorry.
No, let's do it. That's it.
The Bible does not say a ton about parenting. But what I was really, when you were saying that, I was thinking about 2 Peter 1:3 that says that God's divine power has granted us everything pertaining to life and godliness through the true knowledge of him who called us to his own glory and excellence. So that's what the Bible says. That's what the Bible gives us. It gives us divine power to understand everything that pertains to life and godliness. We can't understand everything, but if it pertains to how we should live life in a godly way, it's in here.
Yeah. And what is the power of God? The power of God is the gospel.
That's right.
And you started us last episode with gospel-centered parenting.
Yeah.
And that is where I think we ourselves as individuals need to draw back to that power and use that as the fuel to what helps us make these decisions, the best, wisest decisions for our own family and our own children. So we hope this two-parter has been helpful to you. We certainly didn't get it all right. I loved actually, Lorri, the transparency of like, oh, wait, here's a sacred cow for you, that we hold on to. So obviously, but we hope it is encouraging to you. If you have questions, we have resources here at our church for parenting, and you should not be going at this alone. As Jeff always reminds us, community is really, really important. And so we would encourage you to email us, equip@austinridge.org, and get in contact with us, and we'll help you, point you in the right direction. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining the discussion today. If you have any questions or ideas or thoughts that you'd like to share with our Equip team, our Roundtable team, please go ahead and send us an email, equip@austinridge.org. And as always, kind of like I mentioned before, we hope you subscribe and share. People can find us on iTunes and Stitcher at Equip Austin Ridge. Thanks again for joining us today.